Treasure is a company made up of former Konami employees. Tired of the company's over-reliance on numbered sequels to popular IPs, Treasure was founded on the idea of creating brand new games. Gunstar Heroes was their pride and joy that laid the foundation for their later works. Not only was it the game that helped kickstart the company, but it was even their first developed game. Not counting McDonald's Treasureland. It's not very often you hear about a new up-and-coming game company kicking it off after their first project, especially back when development teams were roughly the same size as indie companies are now. I've always had a hard time really getting into running guns. Yeah, I love Metal Slug, and Contra is good fun too, but I feel a lot of them follow the rather outdated trial and error formula of the arcades. It makes sense when you're trying to rub kids and their parents of every quarter they're worth, but in the console market, it seems like that was never accounted for as much. Some people might see this as a good thing. It requires you to fully understand the game and master it, and I certainly enjoy that aspect too. It's why games like Cuphead thrive so well. But there's a difference between being fair and just being outright bullshit. This is where I think Gunstar Heroes really shines, not just in terms of difficulty, but how it presents itself. Gunstar Heroes is a run-and-gun title exclusively for the Sega Genesis. The story sees the Empire's plans to revive the dormant weapon known as Gold and Silver using the power of the gems. The Gunstars, red, blue, green, and yellow, are all uncovered from their stasis by Dr. Brown to help deal with the threat. Although the story is completely different whether you are playing the US or Japanese version, I kinda stuck by the Japanese version here since the sequel is the one that follows it. You have two playstyle options to choose from, a fixed shot, being able to aim a bit more accurately at the cost of a standstill, or a free shot, allowing you to move around while shooting. I prefer the free shot as the screen can get really overcrowded with enemies, and it's easier to clear them out this way. Integral to Gunstar Heroes are the four types of weapons at your disposal. You have your standard pea shooter known as Force. It's your typical pellet gun that can shoot freely in all 8 directions. Lightning, a laser which can phase through objects allowing you to shoot out of reach areas. Chaser, a homing shot which targets any enemies on the screen without you having to manually aim. And Flame, a short-range flamethrower of sorts that is very deadly up close. You can make all sorts of combinations with these weapons for different effects. For example, if you were to pick up 2 force weapons, your rate of fire will increase exponentially. Or how about the homing shot, already a pretty overpowered weapon? Try combining it with the laser, and you've pretty much just broke the game. Taking into account all weapons and combinations, this creates a total of 16 weapons, a very ambitious feat for the Sega Genesis. Experimentation goes a long way here, and finding the most optimal setup for each scenario encourages replayability. Treasure was no stranger to breaking the norms of traditional game mechanics. Touching an enemy doesn't damage you in any way, rather, enemies have the option to throw you when you're directly up close. The same way you're also able to hurl enemies into others. Sometimes enemies will hold you and place a bomb right next to themselves just to damage you and themselves in the process. Don't be too deceived though, it's a surprisingly forgiving game in many aspects. There's no lives in this game, and in fact, you have infinite continues. There's a health counter, and getting hit by an enemy doesn't cost you a life, it just costs you a bit of your health. There's plentiful health pickups in the game to assist you that can be dropped by enemies or by breaking various stage props in the level. Perhaps the one thing that can be a bit annoying is that there doesn't seem to be any invincibility frames when you get hit, meaning you can sometimes find yourselves in situations where a boss or enemy is just juggling you and you've just lost a good chunk of your health from that alone. If you hadn't been able to tell from the footage, this is a very colorful game. Although a lot of games of this genre often go for a more gritty color palette, Gunstar Heroes is full of vivid color to help accentuate the futuristic sci-fi setting of the game. The music in the game is used to accommodate all of that. It has a lot of great electronic-like music tracks. Also unique to Gunstar Heroes are the few pseudo 3D parts of the game. Treasure really wanted to take full advantage of the Genesis hardware here, and it certainly shows. Right off the bat, the game's logo gives off a 3D look to it. A lot of the bosses in the game contain 3D sprite scaling and rotation to give off the illusion of 3D, as well as individually animated limbs. The Sega Genesis's Motorola 68000 CPU allowed for these ridiculous boss designs, as well as how much the screen could be overloaded. I guess the Genesis did what Nintendo couldn't have. Movement in Gunstar Heroes feels great. The Gunstars you take control of feel very athletic. You have this tackle move you can perform when jumping twice in midair. Not so much a double jump, more as it is an extra means of covering distance, and believe me, it can get you out of numerous situations, even acting as a brief invincibility at times. You can also use this tackle to perform wall jumps. Each level is unique and different. Ideas never feel like they're reused to pad the game out. The first 4 stages of the game allow you to tackle them in any order. It doesn't really matter, there's no difficulty scaling based on which one you pick first. Your first level is your usual run-of-the-mill forest type level. It serves as a great introduction as hundreds of enemies spawn on screen to ease the player into the type of pacing Gunstar Heroes has. The second level takes place in the mines where you take control of a minecart capable of shifting gravity. This level is one big auto-scroller requiring you to constantly shift gravity all while making quick maneuvers. After this, we encounter the Mind Control Green in quite possibly one of the best designed boss fights of any Sega Genesis game, Seven Force. A series of mini-bosses all taking on different forms. Depending on what difficulty you're playing on, you'll face up against more phases of Seven Force. It's unlikely you'll experience all parts of the boss battle on your first run. Each boss has a fairly predictable pattern, which does sound tedious, but this is quickly compensated by all of Seven Force's different forms. My personal favorite is this one. It's a literal gun. His red form, though, is definitely the most stressful. He has these choreographed attacks, giving you a quick indicator as to where he'll be attacking. It's kinda like the turbo tunnel from Battletoads, if I were to compare. The third stage has you pursuing an airship. There's some verticality to the beginning of the level, forcing you to catch up to the screen moving. It wasn't until my third playthrough when I then realized that these air bombs can actually be thrown back at the enemies. Once you board the ship, it's pretty much a straight shoot to the boss where we fight Orange. This boss fight emphasizes your ability to shift under platforms as Orange loves to rush you down if you're in his line of sights. Even throwing him off hardly phases him, he just jumps right back up for more. He'll even grab onto the propeller without getting shredded into a million pieces. I have no idea how he does that. The Dice Palace is the last of the first 4 levels, and it's certainly an interesting one. This level is a board-themed level that also has a bit of RNG mechanics sprinkled in there. Sounds pretty dreadful, right? It's certainly not a bad level by any means, but it can be frustrating. You have a dice you roll from 1 to 3. If luck is in your favor, you might get the Happy Item Room, which has a variety of different weapons to choose whatever best suits you, as well as a health pickup. Nice. But majority of the spaces here are a series of mini-bosses, and no, we're not talking about no 7 Force here. This part of the game loves to show you just how weird it can get. This one boss you fight, Melon Bread is his name, he's just this giant sort of 3D smiling face who doesn't attack you in any manner, he just stands there, laughing. You also have a small minion that will absolutely kick your shit in. Seriously, this guy's tough. Anyways, make sure whatever you do, dear God, if you are playing this game through any of the later releases that offer you save states, don't feel any shame to use it here. You have this one space at the end of the board, and if you're incredibly unlucky, it sends you back to the beginning of the palace. It's terrible, and I feel they knew exactly what they were doing here by placing this spot at the end of the board. You may be exhausted after all the shit you were just put through here, but I'm happy to say the boss here is probably the easiest of the 4. He'll throw a dice, and wherever he lands determines what attack he'll use. Not much else to say here, you'll likely finish him off before he even has a chance to use many of his attacks. The levels from here on out leading to the final boss are also unique in their own ways. You have a shoot 'em up level far before the days of Radiant Silvergun and Ikaruga by the same developer. Without the homing shot, this part is difficult. Sure, you can warp around to evade attacks quickly, but on the other hand, it's also an auto-scroller with no checkpoints, so this part can be particularly brutal if you're not careful enough. One of the final stages is sort of a boss rush of sorts, where you encounter the previous bosses you've fought in the game. No, these are not rematches actually, they're completely new boss fights. One aspect I do find kind of endearing is that you can see all of the bosses watching you fight your way through on a monitor screen. The last thing I definitely want to bring up is the 2-player mode for this game, because playing through the game with 2 players is a very different experience. I was able to get my buddy to do an entire playthrough with me. Thankfully there's no friendly fire here, but what did initially piss me off was that you can both throw each other, which we triggered by accident many times. That's when I realized we could use this to totally break the game. And we did.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, it's okay, you got me on top of him!
Oh, no.
Like, I can use it.
But right now we have to, like, keep
like that, I actually killed that enemy by doing that. So can you throw me up to that hole?
Oh,
I think you have to, like, jump in air and then try it.
Oh, okay.
Jump.
Alright,
Oh, fuck it. Oh, you got it! Enemy AI can be absolutely busted in 2-player, and that makes for a genuinely fun time. They do kinda, the bosses, unlike you, actually do have invincibility frames.
You have to like, oh my god.
Oh my god,
wait,
we
oh my
him.
god.
This
Bro,
will be
no,
good
no, keep
footage.
holding B. It would be.
This will be good for the review.
Oh my god.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, you see over there, I'll keep her over here. Oh, f it.
Gotta be sly about it.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure, but the bosses and enemies don't scale if you're playing with 2 people, so if anything, I think the game was a lot easier with 2 players than 1. Some levels operate differently if you're playing with 2 players as opposed to 1. In the Dice Palace, for example, you both have to roll separately, meaning that all the mini challenges and boss fights are all dealt with solo, at least until you reach the boss room. Oh yes, I forgot to mention, there's a lot of slowdown here, understandably so. Whether the first or second player dies doesn't result in an immediate game over. Rather, whoever is still in control can sacrifice half of their health for the other player to respawn. We even took down the final boss before it even got the chance to attack us in its second phase.
Dude, we killed him before he had a chance to use any of the other gemstones. Fucking hell. I can't do that in 1 player.
I loved playing co-op on this game. It forced us to approach situations a bit more creatively and think outside the box. Definitely find a buddy who'd be interested in playing this with you. Gunstar Heroes is easily one of my favorite Sega Genesis games. The short length, addictive nature, and replayability all make it very worthwhile. Scoping out a legitimate copy is understandably not really worth it, but there's plenty of re-releases you can grab. The Sega Genesis Classics on Steam has it for literally $1. There's a 3DS re-release which adds a bunch of enhancements, and if you happen to come across a Sega Genesis Mini at your local store, you should definitely nab it. I'd certainly love to look at Treasure's other works on the Genesis, but for now, I'm happy to have finally cleared this one off my backlog.